Hello everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to guide you through tonight's journey. I know many of you use these videos to help you unwind or drift off to sleep, so before we begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind relax. The old farmhouse on the edge of town had been empty for decades, left to creak and sway under the weight of time. Few dared approach it, with whispers of strange shadows and eerie sounds swirling through the town. But that didn't stop Matt from renting it out for a weekend getaway, enticed by its low price and the thought of a peaceful escape. The first night passed uneventfully, though Matt noted how odd it felt to be in a place where every floorboard groaned underfoot. It was a house that seemed to listen, leaning in as he moved from room to room. It wasn't until the second night that he began to sense something unusual. Around midnight, Matt was woken by the sound of footsteps echoing down the hall outside his bedroom. He dismissed it at first, thinking he might be dreaming. But when the footsteps grew louder, he couldn't ignore them. Grabbing his phone for a flashlight, he cautiously opened the bedroom door. The hallway was empty, silent. As he turned to close the door, he felt a chill brush past him, like a presence moving unseen. The air grew thick, tingling with a strange energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Closing the door, he lay back down, dismissing the incident as nerves, until the whispers began. They started faintly, so soft that he thought he might be imagining them. But slowly, they grew louder, like a low chorus murmuring just outside his window. Matt strained to listen, but the words were impossible to make out. They sounded muffled, like voices carried on a breeze from a place far away. Unable to sleep, he turned on the lights, hoping they would chase away the sense of dread. But the shadows in the corners seemed darker than usual, lingering just beyond the reach of the light. He could feel them watching, waiting. Finally, at dawn, the whispers stopped. Exhausted and shaken, Matt decided he would leave as soon as possible. But as he was packing, he noticed something odd. There was a faint outline of muddy footprints near the front door, footprints that hadn't been there when he'd arrived. They led out the door and trailed off into the woods surrounding the house. He tried to brush it off as his own, but deep down he knew they didn't match. They were smaller, like those of a child, but they seemed too deliberate. As he drove away, he glanced in his rearview mirror, and his blood ran cold. Standing in the distance at the edge of the forest was a figure. It was small, hunched, with an unnatural stillness. He could make out a faint face, eyes staring directly at him, a hint of a smile stretched across pale, withered cheeks. Matt's heart raced as he sped down the winding road, leaving the farmhouse and its silent guest behind. He never returned to the farmhouse, but every once in a while he'd catch a glimpse of those hollow eyes watching him from dark corners, smiling a quiet, sinister smile that promised he would never truly be alone again. When Sarah and her family moved into the old Victorian house on Maple Street, they were thrilled. The house was spacious, charming, and filled with character, complete with creaky wooden floors and antique fixtures. It seemed like the perfect place to raise their two young children. The first week passed by without incident. They were busy unpacking boxes and adjusting to their new home. But Sarah started noticing small, odd details. The way the attic door would be slightly ajar each morning, even though she distinctly remembered closing it. She chalked it up to the house settling or drafts, but it left her with an unsettling feeling. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Sarah was about to head upstairs when she heard a faint creaking sound coming from above. She froze, listening. It was almost like footsteps. She laughed nervously, trying to convince herself it was just the house settling. But as the days passed, she kept hearing those faint noises above her bedroom. They grew more pronounced, more rhythmic, almost like someone pacing. It didn't help that she often felt a presence watching her from dark corners, or caught glimpses of shadows that disappeared as soon as she turned her head. One night, while her husband was away on a business trip, Sarah found herself alone with the kids. As she settled in for bed, the house was silent. She just started to drift off when she heard the unmistakable sound of someone walking in the attic. right above her bed. Her heart pounded. She tried to ignore it, but the footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, as if whoever was up there wanted her to know they were there. She couldn't just lie there anymore. Sarah grabbed a flashlight and made her way to the attic door at the end of the hallway. The old wooden ladder groaned as she climbed up into the attic, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe, but she forced herself forward. The attic was cluttered with old furniture and boxes left by the previous owners. She swept the light around, but there was no one there. Just as she turned to go back down, she noticed something in the far corner. A small trap door she hadn't noticed before, barely big enough for a person to crawl through. It was slightly open, revealing a dark space beneath it. Sarah's skin prickled as she stared at it. Had it always been there? She forced herself back down the ladder, trying to convince herself it was just an unused storage space, nothing more. But that night, the footsteps returned, louder and more insistent than before. Over the next few days, Sarah noticed her children becoming withdrawn. Her youngest, Emily, began drawing strange pictures. Dark, shadowy figures standing at the foot of her bed, a tall man with hollow eyes. When Sarah asked about them, Emily whispered, "He watches us at night." Chills ran down Sarah's spine, but she brushed it off as her daughter's imagination. She tried to reassure herself that everything was fine, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. One night, Sarah woke up suddenly, feeling an intense pressure on her chest. She opened her eyes and gasped. At the foot of her bed stood a tall, dark figure, barely visible in the moonlight streaming through the window. Its eyes were hollow, empty, but she felt its gaze piercing through her. She couldn't move, paralyzed by fear. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching her. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving Sarah breathless and trembling. The next morning, Sarah decided she couldn't stay in the house any longer. She told her husband, who dismissed her fears as stress and exhaustion. But she insisted, refusing to stay another night. As they were packing to leave, Sarah ventured into the attic one last time, determined to face whatever was up there. She approached the trapdoor in the far corner, heart pounding, and pulled it open. Inside was a narrow crawl space, dark and cramped. And there, in the corner, she saw it. An old, dusty mattress and scattered personal belongings. A worn-out book, an old sweater, a single shoe. It looked as if someone had been living there. As she backed away, she noticed something on the wall above the mattress. Scratch marks, dozens of them etched into the wood, and beneath the scratches, words written over and over again in small, desperate letters. "He watches. He never leaves." Sarah ran out of the attic, her mind racing with terror. She didn't stop until she was outside, gasping for air. She knew then that whatever was in that house, whoever had left those words, they were still there. That night, they left the house for good. But every now and then, Sarah still dreams of those hollow eyes, watching her from the shadows, waiting for the day when she might return. When Emma moved into her new house, she was looking forward to a peaceful life. The house was old but cozy, nestled on the edge of fields and distant woods. On her first night there, while exploring the house, she noticed a small window on the top floor. The window looked as though it hadn't been opened in years, covered in dust and marked by the wear of time. Around midnight, Emma began hearing faint creaking sounds coming from the top floor, like something shifting slowly. At first, she dismissed it, assuming it was just the sound of an old house settling. But the noises returned every night, and with them came a strange feeling that someone was watching her from that small window. One evening, she decided to investigate. Climbing the stairs to the top floor, she approached the window, noticing it was covered in a thick layer of dust. But underneath the dust, there were small streaks, as though fingers had traced along the glass. Her heart raced as she stared at the marks, but she convinced herself that they were likely old. Then, one night, Emma was startled awake by the sound of soft tapping. The sound seemed to be coming from the window upstairs. She got up immediately, climbing the stairs cautiously, wondering what could be making the noise. And as she reached the window, she froze. There, just beyond the dusty glass, was a face. Ethan was exhausted from the drive. After hours on the road, the only thing on his mind was a hot shower and a warm bed. He pulled up to the small, dimly lit motel in the middle of nowhere, hoping to rest for the night before continuing his trip in the morning. The motel was eerily quiet. As he stepped inside, the manager looked up from behind the desk, his face half hidden in shadows. "Just one room, right?" the man asked, his voice low and rasping. "Yes, please," Ethan replied, trying to ignore the unsettling vibe. He was too tired to care. The manager handed him a key labeled Room 9 and hesitated before saying, "If you need anything, try not to leave your room after midnight." Ethan brushed it off, thinking it was an odd joke, and made his way down the dimly lit hallway. His room was the last on the right, at the very end of the corridor. The hallway lights flickered slightly as he walked, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Once inside his room, Ethan unpacked and went to the bathroom to freshen up. The room was small and a bit outdated, but he didn't mind. He was just there to sleep. Around midnight, he was awakened by a soft, rhythmic tapping sound coming from outside. He sat up in bed, straining his ears. It sounded like someone lightly tapping on the door at the end of the hallway. Tap, tap, tap. The noise was persistent. Frustrated, Ethan decided to check it out. Maybe someone was lost or looking for help. He opened his door and peeked into the hallway, finding it empty and silent. But the tapping sound continued, coming from further down the hall. He moved cautiously, stopping at the door labeled Room 10. It was strange. There was no keyhole, no door handle, just a solid door with peeling paint. The tapping sound seemed to be coming from the other side. Just as he was about to turn back, the tapping stopped. Suddenly, he heard a whisper, a faint, almost pleading voice, saying, "Please, let me out." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The voice sounded distant, muffled, but clear enough to send chills down his spine. He backed away, deciding he'd had enough of this creepy hallway. As he turned to go back to his room, he saw a figure standing at the far end of the hall. A tall, shadowy figure, its face obscured. It didn't move, didn't speak, just watched him. He felt frozen, unable to look away from its hollow, dark eyes. With a burst of courage, he ran back to his room, slamming the door shut behind him. He sat on the bed, heart pounding, trying to convince himself it was just his imagination. But the silence was broken by a faint, familiar sound. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it was coming from his own door. Ethan's hands shook as he tried to steady his breathing. He knew he shouldn't open the door, but the tapping grew louder, insistent, like it was demanding to be heard. Then the voice returned, whispering urgently, "Please, I don't want to be alone." Against his better judgment, Ethan crept toward the door, placing his ear against it. The whispering grew louder, almost pleading. He reached for the handle, his hand trembling, but just as he was about to turn it, the tapping stopped. A wave of dread washed over him, and he backed away from the door. The silence in the room felt heavy, oppressive, as though something was lurking just beyond his vision. He barely slept that night, keeping the lights on until dawn. When morning came, he quickly gathered his things and headed to the front desk, eager to leave. The manager was there, looking as though he hadn't moved an inch since Ethan had checked in. As he handed over the key, Ethan hesitated. What's in room 10? He asked, unable to shake the eerie feeling. The manager's face darkened, his eyes taking on a haunted look. Room 10 hasn't been used in years. Last guest to stay there never left. They say he still roams the hall, searching for someone to let him out. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Without another word, he hurried out of the motel, glancing back only once. In the window of room 10, he thought he saw a shadow, a tall, dark figure with hollow eyes watching him drive away. Even now, Ethan can still hear that faint tapping in his mind. like a distant memory that refuses to fade. And every time he finds himself in a quiet room at night, he's haunted by the soft, pleading whisper, "Please, let me out." When Tom inherited his grandmother's old house, he didn't think much of it. He remembered spending summers there as a kid, running through the overgrown garden and playing hide and seek with his cousins. But the years hadn't been kind to the house. It was now worn and eerily quiet. Determined to fix it up and sell it, Tom decided to stay there for a few nights. The first day was filled with cleaning and sorting through boxes left behind in the dusty rooms. But as night fell, the house seemed to change. Shadows seemed longer, and the silence became almost tangible, as though the house itself was holding its breath. On his second day, Tom found something odd in the basement. He was clearing out cobwebs and moving old furniture when he came across a large antique mirror leaning against the wall. Its glass was tarnished, and the frame was adorned with strange, intricate carvings. He was sure he'd never seen it before, and he couldn't recall his grandmother ever mentioning it. Curious, he wiped the dust off the surface. The reflection was distorted, as if the mirror had a life of its own. As he studied it, he noticed something unusual. His reflection was off. It was him, but somehow different. A slight smile that he hadn't made, eyes that seemed just a bit too dark, watching him with an unnerving intensity. A chill ran down his spine, but he brushed it off as an old mirror playing tricks on him. Still, that night, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He kept glancing at the door, half expecting to see something. Someone standing there. The following night, Tom heard a noise coming from the basement. It was faint at first, but it soon grew louder, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Reluctantly, he grabbed a flashlight and made his way downstairs. The basement was cold, the air thick with an unpleasant, musty odor. The tapping was coming from the mirror. His reflection seemed to be knocking on the other side of the glass, staring at him with that same eerie smile. His breath caught in his throat. Then his reflection leaned closer, placing a hand on the inside of the glass. Tom could see its lips moving, forming words he couldn't hear. Against his better judgment, he leaned closer, pressing his ear to the mirror, straining to catch the faint whisper. "Let me out," the reflection mouthed. Tom stumbled back, heart racing. He bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind him. But the whisper lingered in his mind, a faint, persistent echo that wouldn't go away. That night, he heard footsteps coming up from the basement. They were slow and deliberate, as though someone was making their way up, one step at a time. He lay frozen in bed, gripping the covers as the footsteps grew louder. In the dim light of his room, he saw a shadow standing by the door, tall, still, and unmistakably familiar. It was him, or rather, it was his reflection, grinning in the dark. The figure slowly raised a hand, pressing it against the door, just as it had in the mirror. Tom closed his eyes, terrified, hoping it was just a nightmare. But when he opened them again, the figure was gone. He couldn't stay another night in that house. At dawn, he packed his things and left, vowing never to return. But even now, whenever he catches his reflection in a mirror, he can't shake the feeling that it's still watching him, waiting for the moment when it can finally switch places. Lila had always loved the tranquility of her family's cabin in the woods. It was a refuge from the chaos of her city life, a place where she could unwind and reconnect with nature. This year, she decided to go alone, eager for solitude and a break from the noise of everyday life. As she drove along the winding dirt road leading to the cabin, the trees loomed taller, their gnarled branches creating a natural archway that seemed to close in behind her. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the path, and an unsettling feeling settled in the pit of her stomach. Once she arrived, Lila unloaded her car and stepped inside. The cabin was just as she remembered, rustic, cozy, and filled with memories. She lit a fire in the fireplace, the crackling flames bringing warmth to the chilly evening, After preparing a simple dinner, she settled down with a book, the sound of nature outside her window creating a soothing backdrop. As night fell, the woods outside transformed. The comforting sounds of crickets and rustling leaves shifted to an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig. Lila tried to shake off the unease creeping over her. After all, she had spent countless weekends here without incident. Later that night, as she prepared for bed, she heard it, the faintest sound, like whispers carried by the wind. She paused, straining to listen. The whispers were indistinct, but they seemed to beckon her. Against her better judgment, she stepped outside onto the porch, the chill of the night air wrapping around her. The moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the woods with an otherworldly glow. Lila called out, "Hello?" But there was no answer, only the rustling of leaves. She glanced into the trees, feeling an inexplicable urge to step further into the darkness. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the feeling. Whatever it was just her imagination. The next morning, Lila awoke feeling oddly drained. After breakfast, she decided to take a hike through the woods, hoping the fresh air would clear her mind. As she wandered deeper into the forest, the trees grew thicker, and the sunlight became a distant memory. The whispers returned, faint but persistent, echoing around her. Turn back. Turn back. Unease settled in her gut, and she quickened her pace, trying to shake the feeling. She stumbled upon a small clearing, and in the center stood an old, dilapidated well, covered in moss and overgrown with weeds. Lila felt drawn to it, as if it held some secret waiting to be uncovered. As she approached, she heard the whispers more clearly. Look inside," they urged. Ignoring the alarm bells ringing in her head, she leaned over the edge of the well. The darkness below seemed to stretch infinitely, swallowing the light. Suddenly, she saw something glinting at the bottom. Something metallic. Driven by curiosity, she searched her pockets for a flashlight, determined to see what it was. She switched it on and aimed it into the depths of the well. What she saw made her blood run cold. There were bones scattered at the bottom, tangled with what looked like remnants of clothing. The whispers turned into frantic pleas, a cacophony of voices begging her to leave, to turn back. She stumbled backward, heart racing, realizing that she wasn't alone. Panic surged through her, and she sprinted back toward the cabin. The whispers morphed into laughter, echoing in her mind as she ran. She could almost feel the breath of something behind her, chasing her through the trees. When she reached the cabin, she locked the door, her heart pounding in her chest. Lila grabbed her phone, but there was no service. The isolation pressed in around her like a thick fog. She felt trapped, as though the woods themselves were alive and watching her. As night fell again, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. "Join us! Join us!" they chanted, growing increasingly frantic. Lila paced the cabin, desperate for a plan. She remembered the stories her grandmother used to tell about the woods, tales of lost souls and malevolent spirits that lured people in with their whispers, never to let them leave. The fire flickered low, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging her into darkness. The whispers crescendoed, and Lila felt an overwhelming urge to open the door. Against her instincts, she grabbed a flashlight and slowly approached the door. As she turned the handle, the whispers became deafening, filling her head with chaos. "Come outside. Come play." Lila flung the door open, the flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. The woods were silent now, but she could feel the weight of countless eyes upon her. Taking a deep breath, she stepped outside. "Leave me alone!" she screamed into the night. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, out of the shadows, figures began to emerge. Ethereal shapes with hollow eyes and mournful expressions, all beckoning her closer. They drifted towards her, whispering her name, their voices melding into a haunting melody. "Join us, forever." In a blind panic, Lila turned to run but found herself surrounded. The whispers transformed into wails of despair, echoing through the trees. She stumbled back towards the cabin, desperate to escape, but as she reached the door, it slammed shut, as if it had a mind of its own. Lila pounded on the door, screaming for help, but the only response was the chorus of whispers growing louder, more desperate. "Stay with us. Stay with us." In that moment she understood. She was not meant to leave. The woods had claimed her, and now she was just another voice in their haunting melody. Days turned into weeks, and the cabin remained silent, save for the whispers in the woods. Occasionally, a passerby might see the flicker of a light in the windows or hear faint laughter carried on the breeze, but they would always leave, unaware of the souls trapped within. And so, the legend grew, of a cabin in the woods where the whispers could be heard, calling to the unwary, luring them into the darkness, never to be seen again. Ava had always been fascinated by the supernatural. Growing up, she devoured books about ghosts, haunted houses, and urban legends. So, when her friend Mark invited her to spend the weekend at his family's old estate in Willow Creek, she jumped at the chance. The estate was rumored to be haunted, and Ava couldn't resist the opportunity to experience the supernatural for herself. As they drove through the dense forest surrounding Willow Creek, Ava felt a tingle of excitement mixed with unease. The estate loomed ahead, its dark silhouette stark against the twilight sky. It was a sprawling Victorian mansion with towering spires and overgrown gardens. The moment they stepped inside, an unsettling chill filled the air. Mark's family had long since abandoned the estate, leaving it to decay. Dust hung in the air, and cobwebs draped like curtains over the furniture. "This place gives me the creeps," Mark said, but Ava was undeterred. She was determined to explore every inch of the mansion, armed with her camera and an insatiable curiosity. That night after dinner, they settled in the grand living room, the only light coming from a flickering candle on the mantel. "I heard stories about this place," Mark said, his voice low. "They say a woman named Eliza died here under mysterious circumstances. People claim to have seen her ghost wandering the halls." Ava's heart raced with excitement. "Let's try to communicate with her," she suggested, pulling out her phone to record the session. They set up a makeshift Ouija board on the coffee table, a piece of paper with letters scrawled on it, surrounded by candles. As they began the session, the atmosphere shifted. The air thickened, and the flames of the candles flickered violently, despite the lack of wind. Ava placed her fingers on the planchette, and Mark did the same, both of them whispering questions into the darkness. "Is there anyone here with us?" Ava asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, there was silence. Then the planchette began to move slowly, spelling out a word. "Help." Ava's breath caught in her throat. "Who needs help?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure. The planchette moved again. "Eliza." A chill ran down Ava's spine. She exchanged a nervous glance with Mark, who looked equally unsettled. "What do you need?" Mark asked, his voice trembling. The response was immediate. "Find me." Before they could respond, the candles flickered out, plunging the room into darkness. The only sound was their combined breathing and the faint creaking of the old house. Panic surged through Ava. "Mark, turn on your phone flashlight," she exclaimed. As Mark fumbled with his phone, a low whisper filled the room, echoing around them. "Help me. Find me." Ava felt a cold breeze sweep past her, and the unmistakable sensation of being watched settled over her. Mark finally got the flashlight working, illuminating the room with a harsh white light. But in that moment, the light revealed something terrifying. Standing in the far corner of the room was a figure, a woman dressed in a flowing white gown, her face obscured by a veil of long, dark hair. She appeared translucent, flickering like a flame in the wind. Ava's heart raced, a mix of fear and fascination flooding her senses. "Is that Eliza?" she whispered, barely able to breathe. The figure seemed to glide closer, her voice a haunting melody. "Help me. I am trapped." Ava's instincts kicked in, and she reached for her camera, but Mark grabbed her arm. "No, we need to leave," he urged, his eyes wide with terror. Before Ava could respond, The room around them began to shift. The walls warped and the once familiar living room transformed into a dark corridor lined with portraits of people from another time. The whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind, drowning out her thoughts. "Find me. Help me." Panicking, Ava pulled away from Mark and stepped forward, drawn to the apparition. "What do you need?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. Eliza pointed towards a door at the end of the corridor, her figure shimmering like a mirage. "The key. Find the key." Mark tugged on her sleeve, pulling her back. "We need to go. Now." But something deep inside Ava compelled her to stay, to uncover the mystery of Eliza's haunting. Ignoring Mark's protests, she took a deep breath and moved towards the door, the whispers guiding her steps. The door creaked open, revealing a dusty attic filled with forgotten treasures. As she stepped inside, the air grew heavy with the scent of old wood and mildew. Ava scanned the attic, her flashlight beam dancing across stacks of boxes and old trunks. In the corner, she noticed a small, ornate box covered in dust. Heart racing, she approached it and opened the lid. Inside lay a rusted key, its surface intricately engraved. "This must be it," she exclaimed, holding it up triumphantly. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut behind them, trapping Mark and Ava inside. The whispers escalated into a deafening roar, and the temperature plummeted. Shadows swirled around them, pressing in as Eliza's voice grew frantic. "Hurry! You must hurry!" With trembling hands, Ava turned the key in the lock of a nearby chest. The lid creaked open, revealing a pile of faded letters and a locket. She lifted the locket, opening it to find a picture of Eliza and a man she recognized from the portraits lining the walls. A lost love, perhaps. "Mark! We need to free her!" Ava shouted over the chaos. But Mark was backing away, terror etched on his face. "Ava, we have to get out of here!" Ignoring him, Ava read the letters, piecing together the tragic story of Eliza's life, betrayal, heartbreak, and an untimely death. As she read the final letter, Eliza's spirit surged with energy, her presence growing stronger. "Thank you. Thank you," Eliza whispered, her voice a soft echo in Ava's mind. "Set me free." Suddenly, the attic filled with blinding light, and Ava felt a rush of energy envelop her. The shadows dissipated, and the whispers transformed into a gentle breeze. Eliza's figure shimmered, now radiant, and she smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. With a final flash, Eliza vanished, leaving the attic in peace. The door creaked open, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Mark rushed to Ava, grabbing her by the shoulders. "What just happened? Are you okay?" Ava took a deep breath, her heart still racing, but a sense of calm washed over her. I think we helped her." As they left the attic, the mansion felt different. The air was lighter, the shadows less threatening. They descended the stairs, and for the first time, the house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. When they stepped outside, the sun was rising, casting golden light through the trees. The whispers had faded, and the woods felt alive with a new energy. Ava knew that they had broken the cycle of sorrow that bound Eliza to the estate. As they drove away from Willow Creek, Ava glanced back at the mansion. She felt a sense of closure, knowing that they had freed a lost soul. But deep down she also understood that some mysteries linger in the shadows, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. And in the stillness of the woods, a gentle whisper floated on the breeze, carrying with it the echoes of a long-lost love, finally at peace. Emma had always been drawn to urban legends, so when she heard about Black Hollow Road, a stretch of asphalt shrouded in mystery and fear, she couldn't resist the urge to investigate. The locals warned her not to go there after dark, claiming that those who ventured down the road often disappeared, never to be seen again. But Emma, armed with her camera and a fearless spirit, dismissed the warnings as mere superstition. One chilly autumn evening, Emma drove her old car to the outskirts of town, her heart racing with excitement and a hint of trepidation. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the dense trees lining the road. As she turned onto Black Hollow Road, a sense of foreboding washed over her, but she pressed on. The further she drove, the darker it became. The trees loomed like sentinels, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. Emma rolled down her window, letting in the crisp night air, but with it came an unsettling stillness that made her skin crawl. The only sound was the crunch of leaves under her tires and the soft rustle of the wind. About a mile in, she saw something unusual in the headlights, a figure standing in the middle of the road. She slammed on the brakes, heart racing as the figure approached. It was a woman, her hair wild and unkempt, her clothes tattered and dirty. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "Please, you have to help me," the woman cried, her voice trembling with desperation. "They're coming for me." Emma hesitated, glancing around. The road was empty, but the weight of the woman's fear tugged at her conscience. "What do you mean?" she asked, stepping out of her car. "They know I'm here," the woman whispered, looking over her shoulder, her eyes wide with terror. "You have to get me out of here." Before Emma could respond, she heard a distant rumble, like thunder growing closer. The woman's expression shifted from fear to panic. "They're coming! We have to go!" Emma felt a strange compulsion to help. "Get in the car!" she shouted, and the woman rushed to her side, throwing herself into the passenger seat. As Emma sped away, the woman turned to her, eyes wide. "You shouldn't have done that. They'll come for you too." "Who?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. The woman opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, a deafening crash echoed from behind them. Emma glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a dark figure emerging from the trees, racing after them with inhuman speed. "Drive faster!" the woman screamed, gripping the seat as fear painted her face. Emma pressed the gas pedal to the floor, her heart pounding in her chest as they tore down the road. The figure gained on them, shadowy and terrifying, its features obscured by darkness. "You have to turn back," the woman shouted. "It's too late for me, but you can still escape." Suddenly the headlights flickered, and the car sputtered. Panic surged through Emma as she fought to keep control. Come on," she pleaded, but the engine coughed, losing power. The dark figure was nearly upon them, its face still hidden, but Emma could feel its malevolence. In a last-ditch effort, she veered off the road, crashing through the underbrush, praying for an escape. The car came to a halt, and the woman turned to Emma, her expression a mix of fear and sadness. "You have to leave me. It's the only way to save yourself." "No, I can't leave you," Emma protested, but the woman shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Please, you have to promise me you'll get away." Before Emma could respond, the figure reached the car, its shadow swallowing the light. The woman opened the door and fled into the darkness, disappearing into the trees. "No!" Emma shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the roar of the entity as it lunged after the woman. She could hear the sound of struggle, the echo of a scream piercing the night. With a surge of adrenaline, Emma started the car again, the engine sputtering back to life. She slammed the gas pedal, desperate to escape the nightmare unfolding behind her. As she sped down the road, the sounds of the struggle faded, replaced by an eerie silence. After what felt like an eternity, Emma finally reached the main road. She pulled over, her hands shaking as she tried to process what had just happened. Glancing back towards Black Hollow Road, she caught a fleeting glimpse of the dark figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching her. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow in her room felt alive. The memory of the woman's terrified eyes haunted her, and guilt gnawed at her conscience. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had left someone behind, someone who had sacrificed everything to save her. Days passed, but the unease lingered. Emma found herself drawn back to the legend of Black Hollow Road, digging into its history. What she discovered sent shivers down her spine. Years ago, a woman named Sarah had vanished along that road. Locals claimed she had been cursed, doomed to wander the woods, seeking help that would never come. Those who encountered her spirit were said to be marked, destined to share her fate. Every night, Emma would dream of the dark figure and the woman who had begged for her help. She could feel the pull of Black Hollow Road, a magnetic force drawing her back. Unable to resist, she returned to the road, her heart heavy with fear. As she drove down the path again, the familiar unease settled in. She reached the same spot where she had met the woman, but this time, the air felt thicker, charged with an ominous energy. Suddenly, her car stalled, the engine dying as the shadows closed in around her. Panicking, Emma jumped out, her heart racing as she searched for a way to escape. That's when she heard it, the faint whispers of the wind calling her name. "Help me! Help me!" Desperation clawed at her throat as she followed the whispers into the woods, the darkness swallowing her whole. She stumbled through the trees, feeling an unseen force guiding her deeper into the forest. Finally, she reached a small clearing, and at its center stood the woman from her dreams, her expression sorrowful. "You came back," she whispered, her voice echoing with longing. "I'm sorry I left you," Emma cried, tears streaming down her face. "What can I do?" "Break the curse," the woman said, her form flickering like a candle. "You must confront the one who hunts us." Before Emma could respond, the dark figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. "You shouldn't have come back," it growled, a voice that echoed with malice. Emma felt a surge of fear, but as she looked at the woman, she understood what she had to do. "I won't let you take her," she shouted, stepping forward to confront the creature. The figure lunged, but Emma stood her ground. "You can't have her. She deserves to be free." A fierce wind whipped through the clearing, and the figure hesitated, momentarily caught off guard. Emma seized the opportunity, calling on every ounce of courage within her. "I release you, Sarah. You're free." The woman's spirit shone with a brilliant light, and with a loud roar, the dark figure was thrown back, dissipating into shadows. The air felt lighter, the oppressive weight lifting as Sarah smiled at Emma. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now filled with warmth. "You've broken the curse." With a final flash of light, Sarah vanished, leaving Emma alone in the clearing, the woods quiet and still. The darkness had lifted, and as dawn broke, Emma felt a sense of peace wash over her. When she returned to her car, the engine roared to life without issue. As she drove away from Black Hollow Road, she knew she would carry the memory of that night forever, an encounter with the supernatural that had changed her life. The road had been haunted, but now it was free from its dark past. Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders, knowing that she had saved a lost soul and confronted the darkness that had once held such power over the living. And as she glanced back at the road disappearing behind her, she whispered a silent promise to always remember the woman who had guided her through the shadows. In the small town of Eldridge, a dense forest known as the Whispering Woods loomed just beyond the edge of town. The townsfolk often warned against venturing into its depths, especially at night, claiming that the woods had a mind of their own. Those who entered never returned, or if they did, they were never quite the same. Claire, a college student studying folklore, had heard the stories since she was a child. Fascinated by the legends, she decided to investigate the woods herself for her thesis project. Armed with her notebook, a flashlight, and a camera, she set out early one autumn evening, determined to uncover the truth behind the whispers. As she entered the forest, the air grew colder, the trees towering above her like ancient giants. The sunlight faded quickly, casting long shadows that danced among the underbrush. With every step, the atmosphere thickened, and an unsettling silence enveloped her, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. After walking for an hour, Claire began to hear it, the soft, indistinct murmurs of voices carried on the wind. Straining to listen, she could make out fragmented words, but they were too faint to understand. Curiosity piqued, she pressed on, following the whispers deeper into the woods. As night fell, Claire's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that seemed to shift and move on their own. Suddenly, a chilling breeze swept through the trees, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Help us! Find us!" they beckoned, echoing through the darkness. Unease settled in her stomach, but Claire's determination pushed her forward. She wanted to document the phenomenon, to prove that the legends were real. She pulled out her camera and began recording, capturing the sounds and the haunting beauty of the forest. Hours passed, and Claire lost track of time. She wandered further until she stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a crumbling stone altar, overgrown with moss and vines. The whispers swirled around her, more urgent now, pleading and desperate. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and Claire's breath formed misty clouds in the air. "Who are you?" she called out, her voice shaking. "What do you want?" The whispers intensified, swirling around her like a storm. "Help us. Set us free." Fear gripped her heart and she backed away from the altar. But before she could turn to leave, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman, her clothes tattered and her eyes hollow. "You must help us," she pleaded, reaching out a hand. "We're trapped here." "Trapped? Who are you?" Claire stammered, her heart racing. The woman's voice was filled with sorrow. "We were once like you, curious, seeking knowledge. But we fell victim to the woods. Now we can't escape until someone hears our cries." "Why me?" Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because you are willing to listen," the woman replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You must uncover the truth. The woods will not let you go until you do." The whispers grew frantic, and the shadows around the clearing twisted and writhed. Claire felt an overwhelming sense of dread, but the woman's eyes bore into hers, pleading for help. "Tell me what I need to do," Claire said, her resolve hardening. "You must perform the ritual," the woman instructed, pointing to the altar. "Only then can we be freed." Claire nodded, her mind racing with fear and determination. She stepped forward, taking a deep breath as she examined the altar. Strange symbols were etched into the stone, and in the center lay a small bowl. The whispers surrounded her, echoing in her mind, urging her on. "What do I need?" Claire asked, looking at the woman. "Gather items from the forest that represent each of us," the woman replied. "Only then can the ritual be complete." Without hesitation, Claire moved to the edge of the clearing, searching the ground. She found a handful of small stones, each one unique in color and shape. She recalled the stories of the spirits who had vanished in the woods, lost souls seeking closure. As she collected the stones, she felt a presence behind her. Turning around, she saw more figures emerging from the trees, men and women, their faces twisted with anguish. "Help us!" they cried in unison, their voices blending into a haunting melody. Claire's heart raced, but she steeled herself. She had to finish this. She returned to the altar, placing the stones in the bowl. The moment she completed the circle, a low rumble echoed through the woods, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. "Now, recite the incantation," the woman urged, her voice rising above the chaos. Claire took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke the words that seemed to materialize from the depths of her mind. "Spirits of the lost, hear my plea. Your chains I break, your souls set free." As she finished, the air crackled with energy. The shadows surged forward, swirling around the altar as the figures moved closer, their faces filled with hope. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, filling Claire's ears. In that moment, the forest came alive. The trees shook violently, and a blinding light erupted from the altar, engulfing everything in its glow. Claire shielded her eyes, feeling the energy pulse through her. The figures began to fade, their expressions transforming from anguish to peace. "Thank you," the woman cried, her voice soaring above the tumult. "You've set us free." The light grew brighter, and one by one the spirits dissipated, leaving behind a profound stillness. As the last remnants of the whispers faded, Claire collapsed to her knees, breathless and shaken. The forest felt different now, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. She stayed in the clearing, absorbing the serenity that enveloped her. The once menacing woods had transformed into a place of peace. With the spirits released, the curse had been broken. As dawn broke, Claire found her way back to her car, the sunlight filtering through the trees, illuminating the path ahead. She had come seeking a story, but instead, she had uncovered a truth far deeper than any legend, one that reminded her of the power of compassion and the importance of listening to the whispers of the past. From that day on, Claire shared the tale of the Whispering Woods, not as a story of horror, but as a testament to the spirits who longed for release, forever grateful to the one who listened. On the edge of the quiet town of Ravenswood, there stood an old, decaying mansion that no one dared to enter. Known as the Forgotten Manor, it had been abandoned for decades, its windows shattered, walls covered in creeping ivy, and its doors closed tightly as if it held secrets too terrible to share. The townspeople said it was cursed, haunted by the spirits of those who had once lived there, and even whispered that strange sounds could be heard at night. Lily, a young journalist with a passion for uncovering mysteries, had grown up hearing the stories about the manor. She was fascinated by the legend and decided to investigate for herself, hoping to capture the story that would launch her career. Armed with a flashlight, a camera, and a notebook, she made her way to the mansion one cold October night. As she approached the manor, an eerie silence fell over her, broken only by the soft creak of the old iron gate as she pushed it open. The air felt heavy, as if the house were alive and waiting for her to enter. Lily hesitated for a moment, a chill running down her spine, but her curiosity won out. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The entrance hall was dark and filled with dust, with the faint smell of mold lingering in the air. Her flashlight revealed old, faded wallpaper and a grand staircase leading to the second floor. As she moved deeper into the house, her footsteps echoed through the silence, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Lily pulled out her camera, taking photos of the peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and strange symbols carved into the walls. She noticed that every few steps the air grew colder, and her breath began to form clouds in front of her face. She had heard stories of paranormal encounters before, but nothing had prepared her for the feeling of dread that washed over her as she ventured further into the dark. She made her way into what looked like the parlor, where she found an old, tattered armchair facing a cold fireplace. As she approached it, she noticed a strange symbol carved into the wooden mantel, a circle with 3 lines cutting through it. It felt familiar somehow, though she couldn't place where she had seen it before. Her hand trembled as she traced the symbol with her fingers, feeling an unnatural chill seep into her skin. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from somewhere upstairs, shattering the silence. Lily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Gathering her courage, she decided to investigate, her flashlight illuminating the dust particles swirling in the air as she climbed the grand staircase. At the top of the stairs, she found a long hallway lined with closed doors. The banging continued, each sound louder and closer than the last, until it seemed to come from the room at the very end. With trembling hands, she reached for the doorknob and slowly opened the door. Inside was a bedroom frozen in time. Dust-covered furniture sat undisturbed, and an ornate 4-poster bed was draped in faded, moth-eaten curtains. But what caught her eye was an old diary resting on a nightstand by the bed, its cover cracked and worn. She picked it up and flipped through the yellowed pages, reading words written in a shaky hand. The entries spoke of a woman named Eleanor who had lived in the manor years ago. As Lily read, she felt a growing sense of horror. Eleanor wrote about strange noises at night, shadows that moved on their own, and a presence that seemed to watch her every move. She described dreams filled with darkness and despair, and how she had felt trapped in the house, unable to escape its pull. In the final entry, Eleanor wrote, "Tonight, I will confront the darkness. It wants something from me. I can feel it. If I do not return, let this be my final plea. Do not enter the manor." A chill ran down Lily's spine as she read those words. She suddenly felt the urge to leave, but as she turned to go, the door slammed shut behind her. She dropped the diary in shock, her flashlight flickering as a low, menacing whisper filled the room. "Who dares disturb my home?" the voice hissed, sending shivers down her spine. Lily backed away, her heart pounding as the temperature in the room plummeted. Shadows gathered in the corners, growing darker and denser, until they seemed to take the shape of a tall, thin figure standing by the window. The figure's eyes glowed with a sickly green light, and a twisted smile spread across its face as it watched her. "You came looking for a story, didn't you?" The figure sneered, its voice a haunting echo. "You wanted to know the truth?" Lily tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. She fumbled for the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. The shadowy figure moved closer, filling the room with a suffocating darkness. "Once you enter, you never leave," it whispered, its voice filling her mind like a dark cloud. "The manor hungers for souls, and now it has yours." Desperation filled Lily as she clawed at the door, but it remained shut. She felt the darkness closing in around her, pulling her into its depths. In a final act of defiance, she raised her camera, snapping a picture of the figure as it reached out to her. The flash momentarily broke the darkness, and she caught a glimpse of the creature's twisted, malevolent face before her flashlight died. Silence fell over the room, and the figure vanished, leaving her alone in the suffocating darkness. When the townspeople found her camera days later, it was the only trace of her that remained. The final photo captured a blurry, dark figure looming over her, its glowing eyes staring directly into the lens. The townsfolk said that if you looked at the photo too long, you could hear the whispers of the forgotten manor, calling you, inviting you to enter its doors. And some say that on quiet nights, you can still hear Lily's footsteps echoing through the halls, forever trapped within the manor's walls, joining the chorus of voices that warn others to stay away. But the curious are never deterred, drawn to the manor by its insidious call, just as Lily had been. The forgotten manor claimed another victim, and the whispers of Ravenswood's haunted house continue to echo, calling to those brave or foolish enough to listen. In the remote hills of northern England, hidden away from the main road, stood the Ashford Inn. It was an old, crumbling building, a relic from a time long past. The inn had been abandoned for years, but locals still whispered about it, claiming it was haunted by the spirits of guests who had mysteriously disappeared. Emma, a historian with a keen interest in ghost stories, had heard about the inn during her travels. Intrigued by the legends surrounding it, she decided to visit Ashford Inn and document its history. Arriving late one foggy evening, she parked her car and approached the inn's entrance, her flashlight casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. The inn was in a state of ruin. The windows were broken, vines crept up the walls, and the wooden door creaked loudly as she pushed it open. Stepping inside, Emma felt a wave of cold air rush past her, as though the inn was exhaling a long-held breath. Ignoring the chill, she ventured inside, her footsteps echoing through the silence. As she explored, Emma noticed the grand, decayed beauty of the place. Dust-covered chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and faded paintings lined the walls. Her flashlight illuminated a staircase leading to the upper floors, where the rooms were said to hold secrets that no one had been able to uncover. She couldn't resist the temptation and decided to start her investigation upstairs. Each room she entered felt colder than the last, and an eerie stillness lingered in the air. She opened doors to find abandoned guest rooms, each one appearing as if it hadn't been touched in years. However, when she reached the end of the hallway, she discovered one door that was slightly ajar. Curiosity got the best of her, and she gently pushed it open. Inside was a small, dimly lit room with an old, dust-covered bed and a cracked mirror on the wall. On the bed sat an open guest book, its pages yellowed with age. Emma flipped through the pages, her heart pounding as she read the entries. They were dated from decades ago, written by guests who had stayed in the inn. Strangely, many entries stopped mid-sentence, as if the writers had been interrupted. One entry caught her attention. It read, "I can hear them. The whispers. They're getting closer. If anyone finds this, know that I..." The rest of the entry was smudged, leaving only dark stains on the page. Emma's pulse quickened as she realized she might be reading the final words of a missing guest. As she closed the guest book, she heard a faint whisper behind her. Turning quickly, she shone her flashlight around the room, but it was empty. She told herself it was her imagination, a trick of the old inn's atmosphere. But as she began to leave, she heard the whisper again, clearer this time, calling her name. Emma. Her heart skipped a beat. She had told no one her plans to visit the inn. Who could possibly know her name here? She tried to shake off the unsettling feeling and moved toward the door. But as she stepped out, the door slammed shut behind her with a loud bang. She jumped, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Just as she was about to open the door again, she noticed movement from the corner of her eye. A shadow slipped past her in the hallway, its form shifting and unnatural. Emma's grip tightened on her flashlight as she slowly turned to face the direction it had gone. The shadow seemed to stretch and morph, moving along the walls as if alive. Suddenly the temperature dropped and Emma could see her breath fogging in the cold air. The whisper came again, louder now, more insistent. Emma, come to us. A feeling of dread washed over her, but she felt compelled to follow the shadow. It led her back down the stairs, through the dark corridors of the inn. Her footsteps echoed and she could feel something watching her, something lurking just beyond her sight. Finally, the shadow led her to the inn's grand dining hall. It was a vast room with an elaborate chandelier hanging from the ceiling. Dust-covered tables and chairs were arranged as if awaiting guests, but the air felt heavy with an oppressive silence. Emma's flashlight flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, she heard more whispers. Not just one voice, but several, all calling her name, beckoning her to stay. When her flashlight steadied, she saw them. Figures standing around the room, their faces blurred and shadowed, as if shrouded in fog. They stared at her with hollow eyes, their mouths moving soundlessly, except for the constant whispers echoing in her mind. "Stay with us, Emma," they chanted, their voices overlapping, filling her head. She felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow and despair radiating from them, as if they were bound to this place, unable to escape. Suddenly, one of the figures stepped forward, its face more distinct than the others. It was a woman dressed in an old-fashioned gown, her expression one of pleading. "Help us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Emma's fear was momentarily replaced by empathy. "What happened to you?" she managed to ask, her voice trembling. "We are trapped," the woman replied, her form flickering like a candle flame. "Bound to this inn, forgotten, never to leave." "But how can I help?" Emma asked, feeling the weight of the spirit's sorrow pressing down on her. "Free us," the woman whispered. "Burn the guest book. Release us from this place." Emma hesitated, glancing back toward the staircase. Could it really be that simple? She raced back up to the room where she had found the guest book, the whispers growing louder, more desperate, as she approached. She grabbed the book, her hands shaking as she held it. The spirits crowded around her, their faces filled with hope and fear. With a deep breath, Emma pulled out a lighter from her bag and set the corner of the book on fire. The flames quickly spread, consuming the pages as the shadows in the room writhed and twisted. A piercing scream filled the air, echoing through the halls as the flames reduced the book to ashes. The shadows began to fade, one by one, their expressions softening as they disappeared into the darkness. The last to vanish was the woman, who gave Emma a sad, grateful smile. "Thank you," she whispered, her form dissolving into the air. As the final shadow disappeared, the inn grew silent. The oppressive feeling lifted, and for the first time, the air felt lighter. Emma took a deep breath, feeling a strange peace settle over her. She knew the spirits were finally free. She left Ashford Inn that night, vowing to tell the world of its haunted past and the souls that had been released. But as she drove away, she glanced in her rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the old inn standing silently against the night sky. And just for a moment, she thought she saw a shadow lingering in one of the windows, watching her leave. Millstone Library was an old, forgotten place, hidden deep in the center of a small town. Once a proud institution, It was now avoided by most of the townsfolk who believed the building was cursed. People spoke of strange sightings, shadows that moved on their own, books falling off shelves without reason, and an eerie whispering that would echo through the empty halls. Olivia, a college student, had always been skeptical of ghost stories. She loved history and had an assignment that required her to dig up information on local legends. Hearing about Millstone Library, she thought it was the perfect place to find some intriguing material, and so one evening, she decided to visit. Arriving at dusk, Olivia pushed open the heavy oak doors. The inside was dimly lit, with only a few flickering bulbs casting shadows on the ancient walls. Dust floated in the air, and the smell of old paper filled her lungs as she made her way to the library's main hall. She couldn't help but feel a chill as she walked among the towering shelves filled with books, some of which looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. As she started browsing through the history section, a book caught her eye. It was bound in dark leather with no title on its spine. Curious, Olivia pulled it off the shelf and opened it, revealing handwritten notes and illustrations of strange symbols. She flipped through the pages, fascinated by the careful sketches of what looked like ancient rituals in cryptic text. Suddenly a low whisper echoed through the hall. "Leave this place." Olivia froze, her pulse racing. She looked around, but there was no one in sight. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling. It was an old building. Maybe it was just the wind or a pipe creaking. She turned back to the book, but the whisper came again, louder this time. "Leave, before it's too late." This time, she felt a shiver run down her spine. Gathering her courage, Olivia continued reading. As she reached the final pages, she found a warning written in bold letters. "Beware the Watcher." Her heart pounded as she read the last line. "It sees you, even now." The light suddenly flickered, and Olivia heard footsteps echoing in the hallway behind her. She whipped around, but saw only shadows. Deciding she'd had enough, she put the book back on the shelf and started toward the exit. But as she neared the door, she found it wouldn't budge. She pushed harder, but it was locked tight. A chill crept over her as the footsteps grew louder, coming closer and closer. Desperate, she ran toward a side door, but it too was locked. She was trapped. Panicking, she darted into a narrow corridor lined with reading rooms. She hid in one of the rooms, pressing herself against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and she could hear the faint sound of whispering. It was close, too close. Olivia peeked out, her heart hammering, and caught a glimpse of a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was tall, its face obscured in shadow, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare directly at her. She stifled a gasp and withdrew, trying to stay silent. The figure slowly moved down the hallway, its hollow gaze sweeping over each room. Olivia felt an icy fear grip her as it paused right outside her hiding spot. She held her breath, praying it wouldn't see her. Moments later, the figure continued down the hallway, disappearing into the darkness. Shaking, she gathered her courage and slipped out of the room, hoping to find another way out. But as she rounded the corner, she found herself back in the main hall, facing the same shelf where she had found the strange book. The book was no longer there. Confused and frightened, she turned to leave when she heard a soft, familiar whisper. "It sees you. It sees everything." Suddenly, the air grew heavy and shadows began creeping toward her, swirling around her like a dark mist. She tried to run, but her legs felt weighed down, as if something invisible were holding her in place. In the middle of the hall, the figure reappeared, its hollow eyes fixed on her. Olivia could feel a terrible emptiness radiating from it, a cold darkness that seemed to pull the very air from her lungs. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure raised its hand, pointing at her. "You shouldn't have come here," it whispered, its voice echoing inside her mind. "Now, you belong to the library." Desperation surged through her. She yanked herself free from the invisible grip and bolted down another corridor, desperate to escape. She could feel the presence following her, drawing closer with each step. She ran through winding hallways, past rows of ancient books and crumbling shelves, until she found herself back at the main entrance. With a surge of hope, she grabbed the door handle and pushed. This time, it opened. She stumbled outside, gasping for air, and didn't stop running until she reached her car. Once inside, she locked the doors and looked back at the library. The windows were dark, and the building looked as lifeless as ever. But in one of the upper windows, she thought she saw a figure watching her, its hollow eyes glinting in the moonlight. She never returned to Millstone Library after that night. But sometimes, late at night, she would hear the faint whispering of her name and see shadows flickering in her peripheral vision. She tried to convince herself it was her imagination, but deep down, she knew the truth. The Watcher was still with her, and it always would be. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight. I hope you found some peace and comfort. Before you drift off completely, let me know in the comments what time it is where you are and which country you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Until next time, rest well and sweet dreams.